Now I know what you're probably thinking, Will, there's a new Doctor Who series, and Will, your username on the internet has been the Doctor of Who since the dawn of time, so what did you think? I don't want to dwell on the negative too much, so I will just say I did not enjoy the previous series. Not for Jodie Whittaker's Doctor, I think she is brilliant, and these 2 episodes have proved that fact. I just think she was poorly written for those episodes. They gave a lot of the good lines to Graham, who I also love, but he definitely felt like the Doctor character, which was a little awkward when they were trying to move on from the white old male. And a lot of the stories last season just didn't feel like Doctor Who. The Rosa Parks episode was the standout because it had a bit of time travel, it had a bit of history, and it all just felt right. So more of that type of episode would be great, but what we got for these opening 2 episodes of Series 12 was pretty good. And that's about it for my spoiler-free section. If you like Doctor Who, you'll have seen the episodes, and if you don't like Doctor Who, don't start with this series. There's nothing that I can tell you that will convince you to start with this. I would much prefer you start from Christopher Eccleston or one of the other Doctors and get your way back up to here. Diving straight into the Doctor of Doctor Who is Jodie Whittaker, and finally, I love her in the role. That's not to say I didn't enjoy her from the off in Series 12, it just didn't feel like she had come into her own. The writing and acting and everything just didn't feel quite natural, it didn't feel like she had found her Doctor yet, which is kind of standard for most opening series of Doctors, apart from Series 5, which is the best series of Doctor Who. But from the first moment we see of her underneath the TARDIS doing the cables, I was like, oh my god, Doctor Who. It's a moment that has caused weird controversy on the internet. Apparently it's insane that the Doctor can take off the bottom of the fictional bigger on the inside police box and pull out cabling and that can fix things. It's fictional. Shut up. I actually let out an audible "oh" when I saw it. It was the moment I fell in love with her Doctor, and the following 2 hours consistently reminded me of why Jodie Whittaker is brilliant. And whilst that was adorable, the 2 episodes also provided some great darker moments for her Doctor, which we never really got in the previous series. It's very confusing. I mean, pitting her against the greatest enemy of the Doctor, the Master, was gonna bring out the dark side. And Jodie alongside Sasha's Master was so cool, and watching them barrel through time together, constantly coming up against each other in different eras and time periods, it was very cool, and it was so Doctor Who. Seriously, I really enjoyed these 2 episodes on a surface level. The biggest issue is the writing. Whilst there's the occasional brilliance of moments like the Doctor and the Master on top of the Eiffel Tower in Paris over World War having this dark conversation, and then we get the massive lore dump that something's gone wrong with Gallifrey, there's also 40 minutes worth in both episodes of just exposition in different scenes. It just drags a little bit. I got really excited at the concept of an hour-long Doctor Who, especially with a cool concept like a spy thing, and then they throw in the Master, but nothing happens. Well, nothing happens in the first part. The second part definitely finds more things to do with different characters being introduced, traveling across time and splitting up the companions. There's a lot more going on, but as a 2-hour epic, it's just 2 hours, there's no epic. And despite those 2 hours to play with, Lenny Henry, Vor, and the Master, and those light creatures get barely any explanation. They're kind of just there. You've had 2 hours to tell me something, and you never do. I write notes, nothing's ever in order. You've got 2 hours to give me a cool conclusion to this big epic, and the conclusion is the Doctor is off-screen doing timey-wimey stuff. You set up the idea that she's got these companions that are going to be able to help her through time, and then she just info dumps it at the Master and is like, aren't I clever? Everyone's been saying it, but it is so much like Stephen Moffat's Curse of the Fatal Death comic relief sketch.
And I bribed the architect. Say hello to the spikes of doom.
But then the Doctor says,
say hello to the sofa of reasonable comfort. Naturally, I anticipated your journey back in time, and so I travelled slightly further back and bribed the architect first.
It felt like such a letdown after this kind of roller coaster of excitement that part 2 was, to then get that as the conclusion. But speaking of the Master, how did I feel? Well, I was kind of going into this expecting to see the Master, weirdly. I kind of thought either Stephen Fry or Lenny Henry was going to be playing an interpretation of the Time Lord, but Not gonna lie, wasn't expecting Sasha. I also don't think I knew he was in this episode as a third special guest. But when the name Spymaster was dropped, I was a little bit intrigued. But again, I thought it might have been old mate Stephen Fry coming back from the dead or something. So the actual reveal that it was O, I didn't love it. There was something weirdly sudden about it, despite the fact they dropped hints throughout the first part. You know, Spymaster, some really weird looks from Sasha. Still, it just came out of nowhere. And the line Spymaster, or should I say Spy Master, was very stupid. It's something that we've almost repeated every time the Master shows up in a new series episode. Like, You Are Not Alone was a series-long arc that paid off and was amazing for people who knew who the Master was, or just generally, it was an amazing ending to a series. Missy, we kind of assumed she was the Master, so making that line pretty blatant was fun, and I don't know, it just felt right. This one, and his, like, initial portrayal of it was, like, this hyperactive John Sim Master, and it just felt a bit fake. The whole episode had a bit of a fan film vibe about it for some reason for me, so not that that's a bad thing, fan films can be great, but just this weird impersonation of John Sim brought the quality level even further down, but in part 2, he was so cool. He settled from, like, the insanity of John Sim down into a more kind of cruel and intelligent Master that the classic series kind of had, like the Anthony Ainsleys and Roger Delgados. And the fact that tissue compression is back in the series is really cool, even though the actual figure in the Matchbox still looks like a little clay dude. I don't know how you'd make that, like, modern and better without making it terrifying, but something about it was cute, but it was like, we're still doing that? The epitome of how evil and off-kilter his Master is the Neil scene, which we kind of had with John Sim, less so with Missy, but obviously making it male and female, I have to say it, makes it even more uncomfortable to watch. And I'm just glad it's not Stephen Moffat writing it, because if it was Moffat, there would be a joke about the fact that that situation was happening, and I would throw up in my mouth. Also, he has a TARDIS again, which is cool, but does that mean the Master's TARDIS is, like, somewhere? Is that going to come back, assumedly, in the last 2 parts when Lenny Henry, Vor, the aliens, and Master comes back? Is that going to be important? I hope it is. I hope Chibbers didn't forget the fact that he has another TARDIS in existence. But yes, I love this new Master. Pairing him with Jodie Whittaker feels really good. The chemistry feels different to John Sim and David Tennant and Michelle Gomez and Peter Capaldi. It feels like a new interpretation on that dynamic, but it still feels ultimately the same, which is the point of Doctor Who. Everything changes, but everything remains the same. Which is something Chris Chibnall completely forgot last series, and I'm glad that he remembers that Doctor Who is a 55-year-old show, and there's a lot of things that you kind of have to keep to make the formula feel like Doctor Who. And just a small but fairly important thing, the Master's perception filter. As an idea, on the surface, it's pretty awkward because we got our first person of color Master, which is really exciting. So to then put them in the Nazi era and be like, they're still white, is a bit weird. But sure, it takes away the historical inaccuracies that people would probably stupidly complain about. So fine, I'll take it. But for the Doctor to be like, I'm telling the Nazis that you're a secret agent, I was like, oh, that's devilish, Doctor. They're not gonna like that. But then for her to be like, I'm gonna turn off your white filter and make them know that you're not white, that's a bit awkward. It's just a questionable decision for the Doctor to purposely turn someone's filter off to make them noticeably the thing that will make people racist. It was a suddenly dark moment that I don't think was intentionally dark. I think it was like a funny joke moment, but Chibnall clearly didn't think of the social ramifications of that moment. I don't want to dwell on it, but just Alright, my next set of notes is called The Little Things, which is just like a bunch of notes about the episode in general. Pikachu fell down. I actually thought the premise was one of the least cringy takes on the technology is taking over thing, which Doctor Who has done many times. I do wish more time was spent with it because it does feel like a background thing to just introduce the Master and have a Master story, But the idea of wiping humans and using their DNA as a hard drive, for me, is a pretty cool concept. Although I do feel like if there was a planet-wide electrocution, people would probably stop using their phones. I don't feel like everyone would be like, it's just a conspiracy. That mild heart attack I had for about a minute and a half, that's probably fine. I'll keep using my Samsung flip phone. I thought finally getting female historical figures was really cool. It was actually Mum that introduced the fact that they were doing it. I didn't really click that as being a new thing, but when she said it, I was like, that's so true. We kind of had Churchill and Charles Dickens and a lot of male historical figures, so it is cool that they're skewing that to females with a female doctor, because both Ada Lovelace and Noor Khan were really interesting figures in history, and I loved how they were like these prominent figures that also linked into the idea of technology and the birth of a computer. But again, I feel like we didn't spend even remotely enough time with them. And the premise of like, oh, they're the people that created the computer, and oh, this episode's about technology, they just never came together. Like, the biggest implication was that they were able to reprogram a plane because of them, which was odd. I guess they reprogrammed the lady, but that was like alien technology. So that's just... this episode's plot was weird. Especially the spy stuff. I think the best thing that came of the spy stuff, apart from Stephen Fry as M, which was sick, was Graham 007. Weird that laser shoes are a thing in Doctor Who now, but I think I'm okay with it, especially if it's Bradley Walsh using them. He's just adorable. Also awesome to have Contact, the Time Lord's version of The Last Jedi Force Skype sessions. I'm glad that's back. I think it's in, the War Games? I can't remember. It's in Classic Who, I've definitely seen it, so hearing those lines and that kind of moment was sick, and I'm keen for more of that kind of thing to come back. Tissue compression, Contact, love it. What I don't love is how irrelevant the companions kind of feel. It's a tricky thing when, time travel exists, because splitting off your companions and telling them to do something over there whilst you do something over there, my mind's like, you could technically do both. You just jump over there and chat to Lenny Henry and then come back to Australia. Because Yaz and Ryan just kind of exist. There was definitely an attempt to make them relevant in all of last series. A lot of the stories revolved around them, less so the Doctor, which is kind of why the Doctor didn't feel important. But in both of these episodes, the companions kind of do nothing. They only survive the plane because the Doctor edited the plane. Sure, Ryan is able to use a mobile phone, but most people can. Yaz is a police officer, so it was cool to get her doing kind of an interrogation with Lenny Henry, but she asked like 2 questions, and then Lenny Henry just kept talking. And Graham doesn't exactly have many abilities per se, but he feels like the one companion that could stick around and always help out. Pairing him with Jodie Whittaker feels like a constantly good decision. In saying all that, I did love the kind of bonding moment in the construction site. It was the moment that the group felt like a fam. I hate that word. For the first time in both series, it was cool, and then at the end they kind of were suspicious of Jodie, and I'm wondering if that's going to be a thing this series, but then in the next episode they look like they're going to a holiday planet and everyone seems like happy-go-lucky, so I'm worried there isn't a plan for this series. Speaking of a plan, that ending. So Gallifrey's gone again, and it might be by the hands of the Master. I say might because I don't believe it's on him. I think there's a lot more to go on there. I think the mystery of what made him go insane and destroy the planet is important, but I think that it will be like a 1-2 punch of like, that's the mystery, and this is who actually destroyed it. I think it might actually be the Doctor. But anyway, I'm worried yet intrigued by the idea of learning more about the Time Lords, because as a classic fan, the Time Lords have always been boring. They're kind of like the Jedi in the prequels. It's just like, they're all high and mighty and boring and old and regal, so I'm excited to see what a new series approach to the Time Lords could be, but I'm scared of, like, expanding the lore. Speaking of Jedi, I think my biggest fear is that the Timeless Child will be the Doctor, and that she'll become, like, a chosen one figure in Time Lord religion, which just doesn't feel like the Doctor. The Doctor is a mad person that stole a box and ran away. That's it. It was just pure coincidence that they became such an important figure in human and just universal history. Making them the chosen one, the one that is there to save the universe or something, it's just not Doctor Who. There's no mystery if she was born to save the world. It would also take away the agency of the character and make it less about a good person doing good things and more about a good person being born to do good things, and they were always destined to do good things, so it's not surprising that they do good things. But I will say the idea that this thing drove the Master insane is a really exciting arc, and I hope it's over by this series, mainly because I just want to know what's happening, but at the very least, I hope there's some breadcrumbs sprinkled throughout, unlike last series, which kind of set up the Timeless Child and never touched it again, even in the finale. But overall, it was a pretty solid opening. The plot itself was a little strange, but the feeling and the tone of the show definitely feels like it's sitting in the right spot now. Jodie feels exciting. The companions feel less important, but I'm sure that'll be cleared up pretty soon. There's a cool arc going on, and we have possibly a new series-long baddie in the background. So yes, I finally love Doctor Who again. My username will stay, at least for another series. I had this, scary thought of, what if I have to change my username? I've had the Doctor of Who for at least 15 years. 15? No, not 15. How's time work? 10 years. But let me know down in the comments what you thought of the opening 2 episodes, if you watched it, and if you didn't, I've spoiled the opening 2 episodes. Until the next video, make sure you subscribe over there and watch the latest 2 videos up there. But yes, Doctor Who is back.